Have you ever noticed something strange about money? For most people, building wealth feels impossible, until one day, it suddenly doesn't. It's almost like there's an invisible line. On one side, every unexpected expense feels like a crisis. A car repair can ruin your entire month. A medical bill creates panic. Even buying something as simple as a cup of coffee makes you wonder if you should save that money instead. But cross that invisible line, and your entire relationship with money begins to change. Not because you suddenly became rich, not because you won the lottery, but because the rules themselves start changing. Here's the surprising part. That turning point isn't $1 million. It isn't even $100,000. For many people, the first life-changing financial milestone happens much earlier, around $20,000. And once you understand why, you'll never look at saving money the same way again. So before we begin, I want to ask you something. If someone handed you $20,000 today, would you invest it, keep it as an emergency fund, or finally buy something you've wanted for years? Let me know your answer in the comments because I'm genuinely curious how different people think about money. Most people grow up believing wealth is simply about earning a bigger salary. Work harder, get promoted, earn more. Repeat. It sounds logical, yet if that were completely true, but that's clearly not what happens. Around the world, countless people earn impressive incomes while still living paycheck to paycheck. At the same time, others earning far less quietly build financial security year after year. The difference isn't always income once it reaches certain milestones. That's the part most people are never taught. One of the world's greatest investors, Sir Warren Buffett, has often explained that wealth grows because of consistency and compounding rather than dramatic financial decisions. That idea sounds simple, but very few people actually experience it because they give up before reaching the point where compounding becomes noticeable. The first meaningful milestone isn't exciting because of the number itself, it's exciting because it changes the direction your financial life is moving. Before that point, you're pushing against gravity. After that point, it finally feels like gravity begins helping you instead. Imagine trying to push a massive train that has been sitting still for years. During the first few seconds, nothing seems to happen. You push harder. It barely moves. Every bit of progress feels painfully slow. But once the train begins rolling, each additional push becomes easy. Wealth works in a remarkably similar way. The hardest part is not becoming wealthy. The hardest part is building enough momentum for your money to finally start working alongside you instead of depending entirely on your paycheck. This is exactly why the first $20,000 feels so different from the next $20,000. During the beginning, every dollar comes directly from your own effort. Every paycheck, every side hustle, every sacrifice contributes to that growing balance. But after reaching that first major milestone, something changes. Your savings begin producing returns of their own. Those returns may seem small initially, yet over time, they quietly reduce the amount of work required from you. Instead of carrying the entire financial burden alone, the biggest transformation, however, doesn't happen inside your investment account. It happens inside your mind. Behavioral have spent years, and the conclusions are surprisingly consistent. When people constantly worry about paying bills, long-term planning becomes incredibly difficult because immediate problems consume nearly all of their attention. Think about how different your decisions become won't destroy your finances. Instead of accepting the very first job offer out of desperation, you can wait for a better opportunity. Instead of staying trapped in a workplace you hate simply because you can't afford to leave, you suddenly have options. Instead of fearing every emergency, you begin preparing for future opportunities. That psychological freedom is often far more valuable than the actual money sitting inside the account. Think about how different your decisions become when you know one unexpected expense won't destroy your finances. Instead of accepting the very first job offer out of desperation, you can wait for a better opportunity. Instead of staying trapped in a workplace you hate simply because you can't afford to leave, you suddenly have options. Instead of fearing every emergency, you begin preparing for future opportunities. Because it changes how you approach every important financial decision from that moment forward. Research into financial well-being has shown that even relatively modest emergency savings can significantly reduce financial stress and improve confidence. Imagine what happens when that safety net grows large enough to cover several months of living expenses. You're no longer reacting to every financial surprise. You're planning instead of panicking. You're building instead of merely surviving. And once your brain shifts from survival mode into growth mode, you stop asking, how do I make it until next payday? And start asking a much more powerful question. How do I make my money work harder than I do? That single question separates people who constantly chase money from those who gradually build lasting wealth. From this point onward, every additional dollar starts working alongside the dollars you've already saved. That's where the real acceleration begins. And it's the reason the journey after $20,000 looks completely different from everything that came before it. Now here's where most people completely misunderstand wealth building. They assume the journey gets harder as the numbers get bigger. In reality, the opposite often happens. Think about someone who consistently saves $1,000 every month while investing it wisely. Reaching that first $20,000, it feels slow because every dollar depends entirely on personal effort. But after that milestone, investment returns, even if they're modest, start adding to your monthly savings. Then those returns begin earning returns of their own. You've simply reached the point where mathematics finally starts working with you instead of against you. That's the quiet power of compounding, and it's the reason financially successful people often appear to build wealth faster as time passes. The lesson here isn't that everyone should obsess over reaching exactly $20,000. The real lesson is understanding what that milestone represents. It proves you've developed habits that most people never master. You learned to spend less than you earn. You delayed gratification even when it wasn't easy. You resisted emotional purchases that offered temporary happiness but long-term regret. Most importantly, you stayed consistent long enough. Those habits are far more valuable than the money itself, because once they're part of your identity, they continue producing year after year. Strong financial habits usually don't. This also changes the way you look at opportunities. Someone living paycheck to paycheck sees every surprise as a threat. A broken laptop, an unexpected medical expense, or an expensive car repair immediately becomes a financial emergency. They're still inconvenient, but they no longer create panic. Even more importantly, having savings allows you to recognize opportunities that were always there. Maybe it's learning a valuable new skill, starting a small business, investing during a market downturn, or taking time off to pursue a better career. Those opportunities don't suddenly appear. You simply become capable of acting on them. Another fascinating shift happens around this. You stop obsessing over tiny expenses and start paying attention to decisions that actually move the needle. Instead of arguing with yourself over whether buying an occasional coffee will ruin your financial future, you begin asking much bigger questions. Am I living in a home I can comfortably afford? Am I investing consistently? Am I increasing my earning potential? Am I buying assets that appreciate or liabilities that lose value? Wealth isn't usually built by avoiding every coffee. It's built by making better decisions about the biggest financial commitments in your life. This mindset also transforms your relationship with work. When your survival depends entirely on your next paycheck, every decision is driven by fear. Asking for a raise feels risky. Looking for a better job feels dangerous. Starting a business seems almost impossible, but once you've built a meaningful financial cushion, confidence naturally replaces desperation. You negotiate differently. You can reject opportunities that don't align with your long-term goals, because you know one paycheck no longer determines your future. Ironically, that confidence often makes you even more valuable to employers, which then accelerate wealth building even further. Unfortunately, this is exactly where many people make their biggest mistake. Feel proud of their achievement and immediately reward themselves by spending a large portion of it. Maybe it's an expensive luxury car. Maybe it's a vacation far beyond their budget. Maybe it's upgrading their lifestyle simply because they believe they've earned it. While celebrating progress is important, with spending money can erase years of disciplined effort. That first major savings milestone isn't the finish line. It's the launch pad to grow into something far greater if you simply give it enough time to compound. One of the biggest traps modern society creates is the same as becoming wealthy. Expensive cars, designer clothes, luxury vacations, and constant lifestyle upgrades often create the illusion of success. But appearances rarely reveal financial reality. Real wealth is usually invisible because it exists inside investment accounts, retirement funds, and appreciating assets, not in flashy purchases designed to impress strangers. Perhaps the greatest lesson isn't about $20,000 at all. It's about changing your identity. The moment you stop thinking of yourself as someone trying to survive and begin thinking like someone building wealth, every financial decision becomes more intentional. You stop asking whether you can afford a purchase today. Instead, you ask what that money could become if you invested it for the next 10 or 20 years. Building wealth is rarely about making one brilliant move. More often, it's the result of over many years. So if you're still working toward that first major milestone, don't be discouraged by how slow the beginning feels. Every financially independent person once stood exactly where you are now. The hardest stage is building momentum. because your habits, your confidence, and eventually your money all begin pulling in the same direction. That's why $20,000 matters so much. Not because it makes you rich overnight, but because it represents the moment your financial life begins working differently than it ever has before. And before you leave, I'd love to hear your opinion. Share your thoughts in the comments, because some of the best discussions happen there. If you found this video valuable and want more evidence-based finance content that simplifies complex money concepts into practical lessons you can actually use, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.